Hey, thanks for joining us right here on Iron Pros for another edition of Construction Tech Talk. And this is another of our We Talk to Smart People episodes where we've got my favorite emotional support Canadian, Jonathan Gross, on here to talk to us this time about his book. So, hey, Jonathan, why don't you, to start off with, fill folks in about what it is that you do in life as we know it there at Pemeco, so they'll have some context for this exciting stuff that you've got in this foundational read.
Charles, wonderful being here again. It's just a pleasure to talk to you. And so, our firm, Pemeco Consulting, has been in business since 1978, and we're strictly on the client side of the table. And what we do is make sure that our clients select and implement enterprise technologies successfully. That piece success is core to our DNA. It's part of our mission statement. So we will come in and help clients evaluate their business processes and their systems, help them figure out what the future looks like, go to market and acquire and negotiate for new technologies. And of course, the most important piece is make sure that our clients implement those technologies successfully. And as we know, these enterprise technology projects are really, really hard to implement. And so we've written a book called Milestone Deliverables, ERP Project Management Methodology, that is designed to break down these complex projects into manageable chunks to help our clients get across the finish line properly.
Well, in full disclosure, I haven't read the book. I think we've talked enough over a decade or more that I probably have some visibility into it, or chunks of it might look really familiar to me. But if you were advising a group of construction contractors really in those initial negotiations or at that jumping off point to start implementation of a construction management enterprise software solution, what are the different boxes that they should kind of put their hours or their effort or their bandwidth into to make this go?
I think the first place to start is to really understand how the roles and responsibilities break down on these projects. So a lot of companies will come into this project and buy some new construction engineering software, some accounting, project management software, and I'm going to hire the vendor and I'm going to hire their service people, and they're going to come in and they're going to set the system up, and maybe we'll participate a bit. And at the end, we'll have new processes and modern systems and dashboards, things like that. Unfortunately, that's not the best recipe for a successful outcome. Now, again, what we advise our clients to do and what our book breaks down fairly clearly is how the roles and responsibilities break down. It's really important for the client, for the construction engineering firms, for the builders, to appreciate that the bulk of the work is going to be on them. Yes, you can pay consultants to set up the system and map the processes, but do they know your business as well as you know it? Do you want them setting something up for you, knowing that at the end of this gig, they're going to move on to the next gig and you're going to be stuck with whatever they've set up or developed for you?
Okay, so it seems it's very important for a construction team, for a leadership team to really take ownership of their implementation, even if they have a vendor working on it. Uh, what are the different things that they'll need to do to make sure that their vendor is executing on their goals the way they need to?
Yeah, absolutely. And so the question is, okay, if I'm a contractor or a construction engineering firm, what do you mean my people have to do work? What type of work do they have to do?
So it seems like if you're a construction management team, if you're that contractor ownership or C-level group, you want to make sure that you're keeping ownership and responsibility for your successful implementation. What are some of the different things that you need to watch out in particular for that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess again, it comes back to what are we responsible to do? What are the vendors responsible to do? How do we form this one cohesive team? So if you think about what an implementation project is, it's all about setting up and testing a system to support your new business processes, whatever those might be. It could be executing a construction project. It could be, making sure that Your 1099s can report time and expenses to various projects and the like. And so to set these things up right, it requires a lot of configuration. So you gotta really understand what your business processes are going to look like in the future, and then map the system to deliver those business processes. You got to migrate the data to make sure that the system is processing the inputs and transacting against those inputs and producing outputs the way you need to. Make sure it does it really well so that by the time you flip the switch on the new systems, you're ready to run your business in it. And so the work that the client team needs to think about is really doing a lot of the lifting on setting up the systems and testing the systems, on migrating the data, and ultimately training the end users. It's the best way for your people to learn the application and the new business processes. Where the consultants are really good, in knowing how their systems can run the business in general, not your business. They could say, you know what, my system can set up a project one of these 5 ways. Well, client, you figure out which way is best for you. And there's all of these gates and these go, no go decisions that are really, really important. And if you can take this big, complicated project, break it down into these smaller, manageable chunks with measurable criteria to say we've hit our targets or missed them, you'll now be in a position to perhaps separate yourselves from the 50% of companies that don't do these well and put yourself into the bucket of companies that do succeed by saying, you know what, I've hit my targets, I'm ready to move on. Yes, issues are going to come up, but it's how you deal with them. It's how you understand them.
Yeah, so to speak in a language that ought to be familiar to like a large EPC contractor or someone like that, this sounds a lot like earned value management,
Big time.
like the federal government would use, like would be used on a big EPC contract. So, what are the similarities there?
Yeah, I mean, it's like any project, whether you're building a subdivision, whether you're building an aircraft carrier, or whether you're implementing a technology system, it's understanding how much project is getting delivered and when. And so part of that is understanding earned value. Part of it is understanding, whether you've hit your key milestones, where you are on your schedules, actuals to budgets to estimates, but managing this project just like you'd manage any other type of project. The requirements are different, but in the end, project management is project management. And as long as you have the right subject matter expertise in those project management disciplines, you can put yourself a step ahead.
So, let's play a little game that I call heaven if you do, and hell if you don't. And let's kind of discuss what happens to that contractor that does really get this right and has a rigorous approach to this, and what life is going to be like for them after go live and over years of use of this application. And then let's talk about the folks who's like, well, we're paying this vendor to know all about this stuff. We're going to kick back and really let them do this for us, and then what life looks like for them. So I'm not sure which one you want to start with.
Well, let's start with what hell is like. Okay. Let's start with the worst case scenario. And man, you Google it or chat GPT it these days, you will find wonderful, wonderful horror stories of things that are poor outcomes. What will happen? You can't run financial statements. I mean, what can you do if you can't report? You can't pay your employees. You can't collect cash from your customers. This is what's going to happen if you have a worst case scenario. If you have a worst case scenario, you're going to end up having to run around filling the gaps with manual pencil and paper because your system isn't processing the transactions properly. I mean, there are stories upon stories of failed implementations where companies just can't transact business, Chuck. That's a worst case scenario. That's hell. Now, the heaven, of course, the nirvana here is really why companies undertake these big, risky, invasive projects in the first place, because the payoff can be so darn big. So what does payoff look like? Well, it means that We're recording time and expense to a project, or we're paying a contractor, and it flows all the way through the system, through the business process. I've hit a key milestone in my project operationally. It's going to trigger my progress billing invoice off to the customer. Automated, no manual transactions. I'm going to push a button and I'm going to see all of my fancy project reports that show me where I am relative to schedules and budgets for delivering my construction project. I'm going to have key performance indicators. I'm going to have real-time visibility into the data, and I'm going to have systematically controlled business processes. I'm going to have insights like I haven't had before, and more importantly, I'm going to have the strength internally and the new maturity to be able to continue to improve and grow my business. Because I've taken my obligations seriously on the implementation, I've developed this skill set in my workforce that says, you know what? I want to implement this workflow. I want to implement multiple levels of purchase requisition approval so that as we grow, we have good controlled processes to control our spend. Well, I can do it myself. I don't have to spend $200 an hour on a consultant anymore.
I mean, you don't really have to sell that very hard. That stuff sells itself. But in order to really get there, I mean, obviously, getting a hold of the book and doing a little bit of light reading is probably something that folks might consider. But at what point do they want to consider a more dynamic solution of having someone involved to be their sounding board and to guide them? Does that become more attractive with a contract or an implementation that is larger or more expensive? Or at what point do folks really want to look at that?
Yeah, it depends on a few things. I think the complexity of the application, the complexity of the business process, as you suggest, is going to be part of that. If you're going to buy a peripheral solution that does, one thing and it's not very invasive organizationally, um, you know, maybe you can run with that on your own. If something's going to be invasive, if it's heavily risky, you may want to have some outside help. How much outside help depends. Do you have the capabilities to run these internally? And if you have the capabilities to run them internally, can you free up the capacity internally that's required to work on these projects? Typically, you're going to be asking folks to come out of their day jobs and spend at least 50% of their daytime working on the implementation of the new technology, because these are high performance projects that are hard to do in kind of fits and starts.
Yeah, all that makes good sense. And that's why we have you on here periodically on Construction Tech Talk. So if you like the types of insights that Jonathan is sharing, if you're regularly or increasingly facing the need to understand and implement and benefit from technology in your construction business, this is a good place to hang out because we got Jonathan and other smart people. And, well, what do I bring to the table? Well, I have that unique combination of being stupid but curious. So, Jonathan, we'll look forward to seeing you again on here real soon.
As always, a pleasure, Chuck.